You were not born believing you wanted too much. That was something you were taught. Quietly, consistently, and so early that by the time you reached adulthood, you had already learned to shrink the deepest parts of yourself before anyone else could tell you to. You learned to call your needs dramatic. You learned to call your longing unrealistic. You learned to call your desire for real, seen love, inconvenient. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking for it out loud. Not because you stopped wanting it, but because wanting it out loud had cost you too many times. Now you are over 40, and the desire is still there. Quieter, more patient, but still there. And what you were specifically taught never to believe is that it was never too much. It was always exactly right. And that truth is about to change something. The story you were handed about desire goes something like this. Women who want deeply are women who are too needy. Women who express longing are women who are unstable. Women who ask to be truly seen, truly held, truly chosen, without conditions and without apology, are women who are asking for too much. You absorbed this message at different points in your life. Maybe it came from a mother who had already given up on being seen herself. Maybe it came from a partner who felt threatened by the size of your emotional world. Maybe it came from culture, from 1,000 quiet signals that told you the less you needed, the more desirable you would become. And so you adapted. You became the woman who was low maintenance, who did not ask too many questions, who made peace with half love and called it maturity, who said she was fine when she was not fine, because fine was the version of herself that others could handle. You convinced yourself that wanting depth was naive, that wanting presence was demanding, that wanting to be loved in the way you actually needed to be loved, with full attention, with emotional availability, with someone who stayed in the room even when the conversation became hard, was somehow asking for a fantasy. But here is the thing about fantasies. They are only called fantasies by people who have never been brave enough to ask for what they actually need. And this is the part most people completely miss. The hidden desire that women over 40 carry is not complicated when you name it honestly. It is the desire to stop performing. It is the desire to walk into a room or a relationship without first calculating how much of yourself is acceptable to bring. It is the desire to be known, not just appreciated for what you provide, not just admired for how calm you remain or how efficiently you hold your life together, but actually known. The version of you that is messy and unsure and aching and still searching for something she cannot always name out loud. That version. Known, loved, and not quietly asked to make herself smaller about it. Most women over 40 have spent decades becoming highly skilled at one particular emotional task, and that task is management. They manage how much they show. They manage how much they ask. They manage the temperature of the room, the feelings of the people around them, and the version of themselves that is presented to the world. They became so good at this management that it stopped feeling like performance and started feeling like personality. And that is one of the most quietly devastating things that can happen to a woman. Because when your self-protection becomes your identity, you lose access to the desire underneath it. You forget what you actually wanted before the world started teaching you to want less. There is a psychological pattern underneath all of this that has a name. It is called cognitive dissonance. And in emotional terms, it means holding two contradictory beliefs at the same time without consciously noticing the conflict. For a woman over 40, it often sounds like this: I deserve real love, and I should not need so much. Those two beliefs live side by side in her inner world, and the tension between them produces something that looks like contentment on the surface, but feels like low-grade grief underneath. She is not broken. She is not living a smaller life by accident. She is quietly mourning the parts of herself she was told to put away, and pretending she has already made peace with the loss. That mourning does not announce itself. It sits in the space between what she says she is fine with and what she actually lies awake thinking about at night. But what happens next reveals the real psychology. The hidden desire does not disappear when you suppress it. It transforms. It becomes hypervigilance, the constant scanning of relationships for signs that you are too much, that your presence is becoming inconvenient, that the person across from you is about to pull away. It becomes emotional preemptive withdrawal, leaving before you can be left, going quiet before anyone can call you dramatic, pulling back your real feelings before they become visible enough to be rejected. It becomes a pattern of choosing partners who confirm the original belief that deep love is reserved for other women, that asking for it directly is the fastest way to lose it, that being loved the way you actually need to be loved is something you should be grateful for, not something you should expect. This is not weakness. It is the logical conclusion of years of emotional conditioning. Your nervous system learned a very clear lesson. Wanting openly is dangerous. Needing visibly is a liability. And so it built a protection system so sophisticated that you yourself sometimes cannot tell the difference between choosing not to ask and being afraid to. There is another layer to this pattern worth understanding, because it shapes how the desire gets buried even deeper. Psychologists sometimes call it a trauma response. And while that word can feel too large for what seems like ordinary life experience, the mechanics are accurate. When you reach for something real, when you let yourself want openly and the response is withdrawal, dismissal, or quiet ridicule, your nervous system records that as a signal. Not a single event, but a pattern of data. And over time, the nervous system stops waiting for the rejection to arrive. It begins protecting you in advance. It shuts down the reaching before it becomes visible. It learns to call the desire unreasonable before anyone else gets the chance to. This is what makes suppressed longing so self-reinforcing. It is not a choice you consciously remake every morning. It is a reflex, a deeply ingrained emotional habit that was built to protect you, and that now quietly runs your relationship choices without your permission. Women over 40 carry this pattern with a particular kind of weight because the years have added evidence to the belief. Every relationship that confirmed the lesson. Every moment where asking cost you something. Every time you showed someone the real size of your emotional world and watched them struggle to hold it. Every time you reached and someone stepped back. Every time you asked for more presence and were made to feel that your asking was the problem. The evidence accumulates quietly until the belief stops feeling like a learned response and starts feeling like objective reality. This is who you are. This is what love looks like for someone like you. And then life moves forward, and the years move forward, and somewhere underneath all of that accumulated evidence, the desire is still there, unchanged, untamable, still asking the same quiet question: is it too much to want someone who actually stays? What nobody tells you, and what is worth saying directly, is that the desire itself was never the problem. The desire to be deeply known is one of the most human things that exists. The desire for presence, for emotional availability, for love that does not require you to be smaller in order to stay. That is not neediness. It is not immaturity. It is not something you should have outgrown. It is a sign of emotional depth. Only someone who has felt the real weight of a shallow connection, only someone who has lived inside the quiet desperation of being surrounded by people who will never quite see her. Only that woman knows how specific this desire becomes over time, how precise, how undeniable, and how much courage it takes to keep holding it when the world keeps telling you to let it go, to be more reasonable, to want what is achievable rather than what is true. So let me ask you something you may not have asked yourself honestly in a long time. When was the last time you said what you actually needed? Not the softened version, not the addition you adjusted for someone else's comfort, but the real one. When was the last time you allowed yourself to want something fully, without immediately following it with a reason why you probably should not? Because here is the uncomfortable truth. The desire you have been calling too much is not the thing standing between you and the love you want. The story you built around that desire is. And you have been so loyal to that story for so long that walking away from it might feel more frightening than the longing itself ever did. This next part is the one that changes everything. The hidden desire that women over 40 were taught to dismiss is not just a desire for love. It is a desire for truth. The truth that you were never too much. That the people who told you, directly or indirectly, that your needs were overwhelming, were not telling you the truth about your needs. They were telling you the truth about their own capacity. And those are two profoundly different things. A person's inability to hold your emotional world is not evidence that your emotional world is too large. It is evidence that they were not the right person to hold it. But because you were taught to internalize that feedback, you drew the wrong conclusion. You made yourself the problem. And then you spent years, sometimes decades, trying to become smaller in ways that could never work, because the problem was never your size. And here is what nobody talks about. The women who finally stop shrinking, not in a loud performance of self-love, but in a quiet, internal, bone-deep decision. Those women do not find the desire disappears. They find it becomes legible. They stop being afraid of their own wanting. And something in the emotional field around them begins to shift. Not because they changed what they wanted, because they stopped apologizing for wanting it. The desire was never the thing that pushed love away. The shame around the desire was. The constant self-editing, the preemptive withdrawal, the exhausting performance of not needing. When that finally falls away, what remains is something rare. A woman who knows what she wants, who no longer asks permission to want it, who no longer confuses someone else's limitation for a personal flaw. That woman is not asking for too much. She never was. What you were taught about your own desire was never the truth. It was someone else's comfort, dressed up as wisdom, delivered so early that it felt like it came from inside you. But it did not. It was placed there. And anything that was placed there can be examined, can be questioned, can, quietly and with full authority, be set down. The desire you carried into your 40s is not a liability. It is the most honest thing about you. And the love that finally meets it, fully, without conditions, without requiring you to be smaller first, is not a fantasy. It is a frequency. One you stop receiving the moment you decide to stop broadcasting. What happens inside a woman when she stops apologizing for the depth of what she wants? That shift changes more than just her relationships. And the next layer of that story goes somewhere very few people are willing to look. Have you ever caught yourself editing what you needed before you even said it out loud? Because part of you had already decided it would be too much? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what that felt like for you.